Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Reanimated. This is episode 32, talking to you about all things zombie. I am here with my intrepid co host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
And we have a special guest appearance by Kyle, who is back.
Hi
And is it
guys.
Kyle? Hello. Kyle is part of a wonderful podcast called Pop Cultural Osmosis, and he had joined us a few episodes ago, but we are happy to welcome him back. Um, and we are talking about The Walking Dead season 2, episodes 3 and 4. Before we get into that, we should thank our sponsor, Squarespace, who provide our wonderful platform, and it's very easy to use. We use it. We recommend it. Thank you, Squarespace. So, Stuart, how are you today? And Kyle.
I will speak for Kyle and say it's a beautiful foggy morning here.
It is actually quite beautiful and foggy outside.
Yeah. Yeah. I like living in a place with fog. Not gonna lie.
Why?
I don't
Why?
know. It reminds me of I had some England in my youth, and it was often dreary and gray there, and winter here tends to be a little bit that way, and it reminds me of back in the day.
See, fog always just makes me want to take a shower. I just feel like people have been like spitting on me all day long. Uh,
In New
that
York,
could
I
just be
guess
me.
that's true also, isn't it?
Probably that is closer to the truth in New York, sadly.
In New York,
Um,
that can happen any day.
It's true. It's true. It's part of the daily commute. It's one of those things. Um, but I see that we have quite a few news items in zombie related events from the past couple weeks. So people have been pretty active.
It's been crazy out there.
Are either of you two interested at all in craft brewing?
I
Yes.
love the results of craft brewing. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. But our friends at the Dock Street Brewing Company in Philadelphia are very big fans of craft brewing as well as The Walking Dead. So what they have done is basically created a beer that includes brains, not human brains, but goat brains, as well as some wheat and some barley and cranberries and things like that. Um, and the article on CNET actually has some photos of the roasted goat brains. I have to say, I don't know that I'd be trying this. I don't really like my beer to be meaty, literally.
Do you enjoy sweetbreads? Have you ever eaten that?
No, because I know exactly what they are. It looks totally disgusting to me. Also, crackling, no,
I,
no.
I don't have a problem with the idea of eating brains per se. Like, I think especially in places where it's like a cultural food, it can be, probably deliciously prepared. But it seems a little weird to add it to something just for kind of shock effect or for publicity. I think that if beer regularly benefited from the addition of meat, you would see more meat-based beers. And I think the fact that you don't means that
Oh,
it probably
Kyle.
doesn't. So
Kyle,
I
do
don't
not speak so soon. You know that this is probably going to be the next trend.
pork chop beer. I will not be trying this
I
either.
think the absence of meat only reflects a lack of creativity on the behalf of on the part of the brewers, and we'll be seeing a lot more of it going forward.
I would not. I would probably not try this.
I would only try it once, I imagine, because honestly, I'm also like afraid of consuming brains because of another X-Files episode that I saw where a whole town was eating. They were eating brains infected with BSE or
Yeah.
insane cow disease. What's that? Mad cow
Insane,
disease.
insane clam posse cow disease. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, insane cows. And then they also they like somehow by ingesting BS like the prions or whatever in the infected brains, they also gave themselves mad cow disease. I don't know if that's even scientifically possible, but I'm not going to risk it.
I think eating brains is not something I need to do, and certainly not something I need to do in terms of beer when there's so many tasty choices out there. Yeah, I'm going to pass on that. I also think that the next news item is something that I will not be partaking in,
This is
or
the
would.
beautiful thing about this next thing is it's not something that they want you to use yet.
No, no, it's a future product. It
It's a
is.
product only like break glass in case of zombocalypse and then apply liberally.
Yeah.
And that's this
Death
It's
Cologne.
Death Cologne, Ode to Death. And there's a short video that goes along with this article from ABC News. A, phys- a doctor, what do you call him? A
A
chemist.
chemist.
She's come up with a cologne that would smell like a rotting corpse, and it is inspired by the Walking Dead episode entitled Guts, which you and I reviewed last time when we did episode or season one, HA. When they draped themselves in zombie entrails to walk around downtown Atlanta,
As one does.
as one should.
Hmm.
And the components of this cologne are one of the most titillating elements because it's made up of three different polyamines. I'm getting into territory where I don't know how to pronounce anything, but it's putrescine and cadaverine mixed with a third that has a strong sulfur component, so it would smell like rotting eggs. And all three together, and you've got yourself a corpse.
This poor chemist, when she says, "I can vouch that the chemicals really do live up to their name," you mean you know that means that this lady has spent a lot of time smelling, or yeah, smelling really disgusting
Yeah,
chemicals.
except that she's also making a good living going around and lecturing about sci-fi and chemistry. So this is her way of, you know, I guess teaching the masses about chemistry in a fun way, as it seems a lot of people are doing these days.
That is
Mhm.
one way to go. Another element of this story that is kind of interesting is she's even looked into how to make it after like a societal collapse,
That's true.
because it can be harvested. All three of these polyamines can be harvested from E. coli, which I'm sure there will be plenty of. Yeah,
E. coli harvester is definitely the job I'm angling for in the zombocalypse.
it's so much glamour.
The next news item we had on our list was I was a little bit, well, I wasn't surprised, but it's always a little disturbing to see how you would survive following a zombie apocalypse when your city is apparently lacking in Walmarts. So
I think there's a lot of glaring problems with this list.
there are, but I did think that the metrics were fascinating. So what we are talking about is something that appeared, a list that appeared on Hopper blog, and it basically is rating various cities about what your odds would be to survive.
Well,
Um,
states more than cities.
States,
Yeah,
but New York did not fare well.
New York is in the middle of the pack. It's actually higher up than I thought it would be.
Well, New York, you have to remember, there's a lot of area in New York.
Yeah,
Upstate by Lake George, you probably have better odds than I do in Brooklyn.
yeah,
Well,
and I assume that that was the case. That it's got a huge upstate sort of area that is not nearly as densely populated. Um,
With guns. So there you
right,
go.
and I guess that's why California came in third. Where Kyle and I are, Sonoma County, as I've mentioned before, not super densely populated. Probably still quite a few hospitals and WalMarts, and quite a lot of guns actually, because it's an agrarian society up here.
yeah, I think this is probably. I mean, it's just similar to some of the areas of Georgia where the Walking Dead folks are hanging out, in that, large-ish towns, but there's not really much north of here if you wanted to kind of disappear into that. Um, I don't know. It's just, in journalism school, we would have called this like a kind of fitting data to a story without really thinking about the subtleties of the data. We would have gotten a very bad score from my data journalism professor,
Oh hell yeah!
precisely because this map does not take into account the fact that California is a ridiculous thing to compare to Rhode Island or Delaware, because it's giant and includes all kinds of different kinds of inhabitability zones. So your survival rate for someone in downtown Orange County is going to be totally different than the survival rate for someone in Eureka. Um, I don't know. I thought it was a little bit silly. I wish that this was a clickable map here
Yeah,
with the blood spatters on it, but it's not. They just kind of give you the state by state overview.
that would have been a much harder project. And you know what, Hopper? Some like who the hell has even heard of this travel organization?
Hmm.
Now has pretty good visibility based on putting together a zombie. Again, the kind of latching on to the zombie zeitgeist to get some visibility.
Hmm.
But yeah, so other things that really stuck out to me as in terms of like WTF, you got Montana and Washington. No, Washington's actually fairly high up, but Montana and Oregon and Wyoming, these are all rated less survivable than places like California and Texas. Well, Texas I can kind of understand being up there. Texas was first. But yeah, it was like some of these states which I know have like one person every 13 square miles or something are being rated too low, I think.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, a lot of the states in the Midwest, come on. It's probably better odds that you're going to be able to shack up somewhere.
You probably also already have a gun and lots of ammunition.
Right. And, game
Hmm.
Yeah.
for eating and things like that. So
I think it could have been, I think it
it
had
could have been
potential.
it could have been cooler, but they just didn't go there. They were lazy.
You go down to the county level, then I think it'll start to actually make more sense too. But then that's a long project. How many counties are there in the U.S.? Probably a lot.
Yeah,
But yeah,
these Montana cattle ranchers are going to be laughing at us in the zombocalypse, man. Surrounded by food, nothing
Well,
around them.
if they can protect the food though, right? Because
Well,
the cattle would attract a variety of things, raiders as well as zombies to eat the cattle. Who knows? That may not be the best situation. But speaking of survivability, were either of you on the little Reddit live chat with Max Brooks?
no, I only saw it after the fact.
and
Yeah, me
I
too.
only go to Reddit when Kyle tells me to.
I did too. He was on there basically he was answering a lot of questions about World War Z, but he has a new book coming out called The Harlem Hellfighters. But as is expected, most of the people who were asking him questions wanted to know about zombies. So he gave some pretty interesting answers to a few things. And I read through some of them. But Stuart specifically had a favorite, so I will let you go into that.
I did, and I feel like I'd read a lot of his responses in other interviews and articles. So poor
Mhm.
guy kind of must have gotten pummeled with, "Did you like Brad Pitt's blah blah blah?" And what about the movie? And you kind of brushed a lot of that off. But the question that I enjoyed was, what are your thoughts on people of doomsday preppers? I used to watch that show myself, since they too are just preparing for a disaster, just on a larger scale. And Max's answer was, I think a lot of the folks on that show, like a lot of folks on reality TV shows, are carnival acts. So much of reality TV is scripted for pure entertainment. Very little exists to educate. If I was going to do a show about doomsday preppers, it would be about the inner workings of the CDC and FEMA and the organizations that will really save us. And I thought that was brilliant, and I would like to have that show on TV.
Yeah, I think that would be an interesting show. Although I think that show might scare me because some
Well,
of the things the CDC says about pandemics and things like that terrify me.
yeah,
So,
so they do have a certain element of their outreach that is like scaring you straight. But I think there's a lot of stuff that's also, this is what we'll do to combat this scenario, and I feel like that would actually be helpful. And also, I follow them on Twitter now, the CDC, and they have a lot of helpful stuff about like earthquake preparedness and stuff like that.
Mhm.
They're, I feel like they're a valuable organization that doesn't have enough public visibility.
Except when they're getting blown up in random television shows.
They love, yeah,
true.
people love to blow them
Actually,
up.
the CDC is often portrayed as either like the scary guys in the hazmat suits who come in at the last second, or like totally incompetent people who like
Yeah.
can't. That's one of the things I liked about Contagion, which you guys mentioned last week. Those like lonely few scientists like still coming into work every day at the CDC and trying to make the cure.
Help.
Yeah.
Unlike in The Stand and other such things where they're like the ones who caused all the problems.
Yeah, basic
So,
ground zero. Speaking of the stand, my favorite answer from the AMA was that he did answer a lot of questions about World War Z and kind of his general disappointment, but also kind of acceptance of the movie for what it is, and not like he didn't seem too bummed anymore that it's not directly based on the book. And he says here that Stephen King wrote to me through our mutual friend Frank Darabont. He said, no matter what the movie turns out to be, and he should know a thing or two about that, it will bring attention to the book. And there's two things I like about this. First, Stephen King definitely knows what this is like because he says a lot of his
yeah.
own works, like really, really mangled by people. Um, But second, I think it's hilarious that Stephen King would deliver that message through Frank Darabont, a man who is only famous because he has directed many Stephen King based movies. It's like, Frank, tell Max not to worry about how much the director totally screws with everything you were trying to do. It'll be okay. And
Well,
Frank's like, sure, Stephen. I'll let him know. Were you thinking of one in particular? No, 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 no.
I like the idea that they're just passing notes in class almost, right?
Yeah,
Like,
like why would Stephen King need to write something and then like give it to Frank in today's like email and even postal service driven worlds? Like give it to Frank Darabont to
I don't.
deliver it to Max Brooks.
Stephen King is an interesting gentleman, to say the least.
True.
And he's kind of hanging out there in his little place in Maine, and maybe he just has to have couriers to bring his messages around to the world to insulate him from everybody else. I don't know.
It's a little weird that
Um,
Max Brooks even had to mention Frank Darabont in that sentence, but he brings up his name at least 3 or 4 times in the AMA.
I honestly, I noticed that as well, and I kind of felt like the point of that story was to put Stephen King and Frank Darabont in the same sentence related to him. So it was just very funny. Um, but yeah, I actually think the interesting thing about that is that some of Stephen King's films that have been most successful are very loosely based on short stories, like Stand By Me or Shawshank Redemption
Hmm.
and things like that. And those are places where they took those stories and those films. Well, there were some basis in what he like. The kernel of his story was there, but they basically took them and made them into something very different. And then movies that you would think would be amazing, like The Stand. Maybe if you guys love The Stand, I apologize, but I just thought that some of my favorite stories that he has done were not as successful in films.
You did not like the Stand miniseries starring the incomparable Gary Sinise?
I did not.
I'm crushed, AJ.
I'm sorry. Have to be honest.
When I was a small child, I wandered into the room and my parents were watching that, and uh, Jamie Sheridan, who plays Randall Flagg, the uh, evil character of the book and the miniseries, is standing in a cornfield looking at the old woman on the porch, and there's like rats all around him. And it was probably the most terrifying image. It was like seared into my memory. Um, so I have
Well,
an affection for the Stand miniseries for scaring the crap out of me, but I think you're right that it's the opening sequence aside, which is Don't Fear the Reaper plays while they're panning through a CDC that's totally filled with dead people. Like that aside, it's not that great.
that's
I
true.
I love the beginning of that. Well, the book, the miniseries, I also enjoyed for the most part, but the book, when you're still just dealing with the disease and the direct aftermath of the disease, that
Mm.
is an amazing bunch of storytelling. And once they get into like the good and evil crap, then they lost me. They meaning Stephen
Yeah,
King.
yeah. He got a little out of control in
So
that
you're saying
part of it.
page 465 of 1724 or
Yeah,
something like
exactly. Those first
that.
464 pages were amazing.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing he mentioned about Frank Darabont, which was very interesting in the AMA, was when he was like, "I haven't watched an episode of I love the Walking Dead TV show. I haven't watched it since they fired Frank Darabont, my best friend ever."
I don't
That
believe him. I think he's making that up.
I think it's interesting that he's much more uh, loyal to Darabont than he is to Kirkman, who actually created the intellectual property in the first place.
He's very sensitive to people being fired, though, because he also, talks about when he was fired from Saturday Night Live.
True, but I also think that just means that I don't know if you guys have been talking about this in a meta way. I don't remember, kind of around the season 1 to season 2 break, but it was a weird thing when they fired Frank Darabont. Like they
Yes.
were like, "Hey, he's fired," and then they were like, "No, he's not fired," or like, "We love Frank," and then Frank like he didn't make any public statements, and everyone was like wondering. And I think that this just points, along with a bunch of other things, but this just points to it being like way acrimonious behind the scenes.
Oh,
Like,
I don't think it was even behind the scenes. Just I think they tried to keep a lid on it, but I think it was absolutely just a mess
yeah.
related to this. And I think Frank Darabont was negotiating for a lot of things and perhaps got them, and maybe that's why he stayed a little bit more silent. But I think it was very clear that it was an acrimonious break. Do
Hmm.
you, Stuart? Do you agree
We've
with that?
we've reported in the last 6 months about the ongoing lawsuit that
Right.
Darabont was bringing against the MC, and it's weird that this show has generated the level of acrimony and the books because what the original illustrator is also taking Kirkman to task. I guess anytime you have a very successful project, people are going to come after you.
When they decided to do this stuff with Darabont, it was almost like they saw how successful it was being, and they were like, "Oh, we made this deal with him, so we want to get him out of here because we want to make more money." And it just seemed a little ridiculous. And even the lawsuit, not that I know all of the intimate details, but it all seems kind of crazy because the franchise has been so successful. It feels like, come on, kids, can't you just share in the fun and enjoy your success? But no, they cannot do that. So, so it's sad. It's sad for the fans, I think. So, Walking Dead stuff. So, I found this fun little article, and I had seen things related to this before. This had been something, especially toward the end of Breaking Bad. A lot of and or during Breaking Bad, there had been a lot of people that said that Breaking Bad was a prequel to The Walking Dead, and this is a little there's a little article that we'll put in the show notes that basically pulls together some evidence that shows that they were trying to hint that Breaking Bad was a precursor to the Walking Dead world, and it is kind of fun. So, and it's funny because we were talking last week about Merle's meth bag, and I almost mentioned the fact that it was blue meth in there and that it was probably for Breaking Bad.
Hmm.
And, so there's some fun little things in this.
Beyond the blue meth, I don't think any of these things stand up to scrutiny. I mean, blue meth, I think, I don't know. I have no idea what color meth is on the streets. I assume not blue most of the time. But otherwise, it's like, oh, they have the same Dodge Charger. It's on the same network. They probably have the same deal with Dodge. And otherwise, and then Daryl has described Merle's former dealer as a janky little white guy who uses "bitch" as an epithet at the end of a lot of his sentences. Like that's supposed to be Jesse Pinkman. It's just such a stretch. The blue meth
Hmm.
is the only real solid link.
I'm sure that they, in the movie studio probably employs a lot of the same production designers and stuff like that. But at the same time, like it's just they're just reusing stuff that they have on hand. Like they probably just had the blue meth stuff flying around. The production company had it, somebody had it, and they're like, oh, let's throw it in the bag. It'll be fun if anyone ever notices.
Oh
Same with
no,
the
I
same
think
with the
I think
Challenger.
I think they're deliberately planting fun little Easter eggs. I don't think that it's serious. I think this is just something that fans have fun with. So I don't know that it's necessarily true. But they also try to say that Glenn was somehow involved. So this is what fans do when they overanalyze all sorts of shows.
Hmm.
Um, but in the whole spin-off news, have you ever seen these kinds of announcements where they basically tell you absolutely nothing
Yeah, yeah. We
about they keep saying it's official, it's official, it's official. There's going to be a Walking Dead spin-off in the same universe, and then they tell you absolutely nothing.
It's kind of insane that Rolling Stone would even publish this. This is all old information about the spin-off The Walking Dead show.
And this was only one of several. I don't know if you noticed this, but this was only one of several different things that came out on the same day. So it wasn't just Rolling Stone reporting it. So I was just like, why? What was the point of doing this? This is the same information that we've had. But in any case, I guess they're still doing this. So,
I would really love to see different areas of the Walking Dead universe. Like I think, I mean that's what was kind of fun about World War Z, both the book and the film. Even though I had my problems with the film, at least it kind of took you all around the world and showed you how different people were dealing with this. And the Breaking Bad stuff made me wonder what kind of a zombie apocalypse show set in that like soaring and New Mexican Vista desert kind of stuff would look like. But at the same time, the only hope that I have is like, please don't take us back to the first days after the breakout, and then take us like through the learning process of all of these people again. Like just start it when The Walking Dead currently is, because I don't know if I can take like another bunch of idiot characters, like wondering if the zombies will ever come back, and like wondering if they're ever gonna get like a cure or anything like that. Like just we've seen all that stuff, and all we want to see now is people figuring out how to survive in this new universe and like rebuilding society and stuff like that.
That's a good point. Because that's
It,
one of the problems I've been running into doing, going back and doing our reviews as far after the fact as we are, is we're having to like, it's painful to watch people be this stupid about
absolutely.
their universe. But as far as other fiction in the same universe, Kyle, you've got The Walking Dead for PC, and it might be on console too, the
Mm-hmm.
game, which is an extremely narrative-driven game. It's actually, to call it a game is a little bit generous because it's kind of like a point and choose your own adventure clicking sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a whole entirely different cast of characters, although Glenn does make an appearance in the game. Otherwise, it's also set in Georgia though, so it's not that far away.
Yeah. Yeah, I have not played the games, although I know that I should. I've heard that they're very excellent, but I haven't had the chance to knock through them yet, so that's a strong recommendation.
Can't wait till 2015. Bring on the spin-off show if it ever actually materializes.
Yeah, I was gonna say
But that's the
maybe
other.
it says it has no date, no setting, no cast.
No
Um,
information.
oh,
But yet we're gonna throw out like 10 little news articles about like it's just so strange, right?
it doesn't even say that it's actually coming in 2015. It says although AMC originally planned to launch it in 2015, the network has not offered any further details on when it would premiere. My fear is that this is the kind of thing where like the eventually the viewership for Walking Dead will kind of start to deflate. It always happens like as shows get older, and then this will just get quietly canceled. A little ways into production because they didn't have their stuff together enough to get it out the door before 2016 or something like that.
I would be more concerned that Andrew Lincoln is going to be like, "What have I signed up for?" It's like 7, 8 years later, and he's still Rick Grimes. He's like, "I'm an Englishman. I don't want to be this
I don't
Georgian sheriff anymore."
I don't want to live in Georgia anymore.
He's
It's
like,
hot down here.
remember when I used to just stand in the snow with Karen Knightley and give her love notes when she was married to somebody else? Remember that?
I think
No.
he'd actually probably rather forget that too. He needs to
I
do some other
know.
stuff.
I know. So we've been seeing a lot of college courses that have a zombie flavor, so to speak. um,
That's the best kind of flavor.
um, and there is a new one being offered at San Diego State University, and their idea behind this is to basically capitalize on people's interest in zombies and lack of interest in things like discussions of racism and classism and use the zombie topic to get people interested. And I was very skeptical reading this article. I was like, another zombie course. And then watching the video that they had, I was like, oh, okay. I can see why they're doing this.
Yeah.
Um,
They also
and
watched Pontypool in this class.
they did, which I thought was very interesting.
Pontypool, Pontypool.
Don't do it, man.
Don't.
The required reading for this class I thought was quite interesting too. American Gothic Zombie, Race, Suppression, and the Zombie, and Max Brooks' survival guide for the zombie apocalypse, which, while is very informative, I don't know what they're learning about class and multiculturalism necessarily through that book.
I've seen a lot of news stories like this, and it's almost always like so a school will be offering a class on something patently ridiculous. Like I think a couple years ago there was a StarCraft class at UC Berkeley.
Oh my God.
And
Yes,
then
there was.
like news organizations write about it, and then like people in the comments section, like half of them say this sounds awesome, and the other half of them say like this is like the travesty, like what are these people planning to go to college for, or whatever. Look, this is the professor is like probably either a recently graduated person who's trying to get some experience under her belt, or she's a PhD student who needs to teach some classes for her and come up with a curriculum for her program, and they're going to offer it for like a half a credit, and it won't actually matter, and people are only taking it because it's a fun kind of blow off class that they don't really have to think about. Like it's not a real class. Like no one's majoring in like zombie racism. Like it's just a way for the school to kind of leverage, the things people are interested in to give people experience as teachers. Um, I think that it's almost always like just something that they're doing for their particular programs, and not an actual like thing that the school has actually sat down, the board of chancellors or whatever, and been like, guys, we really got to get on this like zombie racism stuff.
While I don't disagree that it probably is often younger professors, in this article at least, this Professor Hicks has been teaching for 30 years. And so
Oh,
what I
okay.
think on her in her case, she's just seeing people really get into stuff that she has had trouble transmitting to her classes in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So she might just be like, "Wow, I'm tired of talking to kids who are just disinterested in what I'm trying to convey." And now they're super psyched about writing a midterm about zombies.
And I have to hand it to her. If you've been teaching 30 years and then decide to do this, go for it. I think
That's
that's
some
awesome.
that's some flexibility right there, yeah.
It is. It is. And our last item. So Psych, the television show, is ending this season, and they have been doing a lot of, they do their episodes around pop culture. It's like pop culture after pop culture reference. And their latest episode had a special guest star, and it was Bruce Campbell. So, as you might imagine, this episode had a lot to do with the horror genre and zombies and things like that. It wasn't a particularly strong episode, but Bruce Campbell was amazing. So, did either of you catch this?
I was surprised to learn that Psych is still on air.
Sigh.
I don't have anything against Psych. I just did not realize that it was still on TV.
I
I
don't
did
think
not
I've
catch it,
seen
no.
it in 4 years or so.
It's one of those shows that's just on constantly, so you just don't realize how many seasons that it's had. I am very surprised. But
I feel like it just kind of took over from Monk, you know?
Hmm.
yeah, well, it was on, didn't it predate Monk
Thought they were
too?
contemporaries.
No, I thought that it definitely. I think they overlapped, but I think Monk was definitely first.
Okay. But in any case, it's Bruce Campbell. He looks pretty stylish and he's doing his Bruce Campbell thing. So I would say it's worth a bit of a watch. And he's himself. So go for it.
I definitely
Um,
watch it just for the zombie element because
it's not as successful as you want it to be. I wanted it to be better, but it's still, you can pick out different things within it that you're like, fascinating. So,
I will definitely wait for the clip to be uploaded to YouTube, and then watch the clip.
but without further ado, would you gentlemen like to move into our review this week?
boy, would I.
So we are discussing The Walking Dead season 2, episodes 3 and 4. And I suspect this is the reason why Kyle has decided to join us today.
Hmm. Definitely. I have a affection for actually both of these episodes turned out to be ones that I remembered pretty fondly from when they aired. But especially episode 4, I have a vested interest in episode 4.
All right. But these are episodes that were aired in 2011, and they are Save the Last One and Cherokee Rose. So, how would you like to tackle this?
Well, one at a time. Well, when we left off our last review, and actually, Kyle, I'd like to hear from you. Did you just listen to our review of 1 and 2, or did you go out and watch 1 and 2 to get ready?
I listened to your review of 1 and 2 and found that I remembered them pretty well. So
Yeah.
I did not rewatch those two episodes before watching the show.
Okay. Well, at the end of 2, we left Shane and Otis in a bit of a sticky wicket.
Hmm.
Which, like, my description of it then was, why did they just stay right next to the door after they closed the grate? And then at the beginning of 3, they're running through the school. So they actually didn't stay right by the door. They were just, I guess, catching their breath or something. But yeah, so Otis and Shane are at the school after they'd gone and gotten medical supplies from a FEMA aid station. And yeah, they're in dire straits, as it were. Otherwise, what Carl is still sick and Sophia is still missing. And this episode was just awesome. I love this episode. I'm not gonna lie.
You guys talked about this a little bit last week as you kind of returned to The Walking Dead season 2 after not having talked about an old episode for a while, and been watching season 4 episodes in the meantime. And to to give the series a lot of credit, like it's a very different show. People act differently. I was surprised at how much gunfire there is and how little they've learned that they have to stick with the stabby weapons.
Yeah.
Um,
Right?
it was kind of crazy. I was like, guys, did you not bring anything sharp with you at all? Like Shane's got 2 guns and no knives. But yeah, it was I don't know. It was really fascinating, and it made me like kind of sad that with these like serialized shows, I honestly very rarely go back and just watch like a random episode from a past season because you need that context and stuff. Um, but it also made me appreciate how far The Walking Dead has come.
Yeah, and yeah, we've kept kind of coming upon that realization with same with like the training that the kids have in season 4 versus what they absolutely seem to be lacking in season 2. And yeah, in season 4 we also have like entire scenes where people are fighting off uh, numerically superior zombies with only melee weapons
Hmm.
now, and it seems like they would never even think to do that here in this at this point in the storyline.
Like when Shane and Otis are on top of that platform and the zombies are all like beneath them and they're like firing their guns and he has to like jump off and he hurts his ankle and everything. Like I can see like season 4 like Carol and Tyrese or something just kind of kneeling down, getting out their ice picks or whatever and like getting to work, like
Yeah, taking care of business.
yeah, like they can't reach us. Why are we even worrying about this? Like, let's just start busting some skulls.
Yeah.
um so it was really fascinating actually to go back and see that the characters uh, still, even after everything that's happened after the whole first season of the CDC and stuff, like don't quite understand how
Well,
to
and
survive.
some of them still don't even know how to use weapons
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in these particular episodes.
And that is coming up, which is a good thing. At least like the writers are addressing it, but it's as characters they are not. It's not fast enough. They're still like at a very glacial pace, being like, oh, and soon we'll have shooting practice.
I know.
The thing we should start talking about though with this episode is the opening scene, which also becomes the closing scene.
All
Um,
right. Go. I want you to intro it, but I have some things to say about this. Go
I'm
for it.
sure you will. I just want to go through my quick notes. It's just 4 bullets. So we've got a shower scene opening. And so my first thought is, holy shit, running water. My second thought is, holy shit, hot water. My third thought is, holy shit, you're wasting water.
I have in my
Right.
notes here. I have he ran the shower the whole goddamn time he was flashbacking. That's what I wrote in my
Yeah.
notes.
And he was shaving his head wrong. And we're talking about Shane here. John Bernthal is, yeah, just running clippers over his hair with the grain, which is, come on.
But this is because he's kind of going crazy, I think. Come on, you can excuse it. He's having a bit of a breakdown, no?
Yeah, by the time he finishes shaving his head and the end result is inexplicably perfect, he's ends up looking in the mirror.
But this is the thing. I feel like, and I did share this in the notes. Anytime a character is having a very long hair shaving moment and they're looking into the mirror at themselves, really reflecting and looking kind of insane, things are not going too well. Like this happens this is used in a lot of movies and shows where a character suddenly shaves off their hair, and it never means a good thing. That means that character is having some sort of a break with reality, typically.
Counterpoint, GI Jane Demi Moore. That when she shaves her head, everything starts coming up daisies.
Well, then could you say like when women shave their heads? Because I guess Sigourney Weaver does the same thing in Aliens.
That's true. Yeah. So
So maybe when men shave their heads, they go crazy, and women turn out really super strong.
and V for Vendetta, Natalie Portman when she gets her she gets her head shaved, doesn't she?
Yeah, she doesn't shave her own head different
Yeah.
In samurai movies, you definitely know shit's getting real when they drop
when
to
they
their
shave their
knees
heads.
and cut that little top knot off and drop it in a river.
Oh, yeah, that's a different kind of crazy.
Well, anyway, I thought the same thing when he was wasting the water. I just kept being like, "Turn the water off. What are you doing?" And I just feel like these characters have been without running water, let alone hot water, for so long. I just, even in his crazy state, I just don't think he'd waste the water.
Well, it's well, since they left the CDC, it's been a couple of days, right? I mean, this is like day three or four since Sophia went missing. It's so yeah, it's been the better part of a week since they had a hot shower at the CDC. I mean, I
But
think any of us, if we'd gone like almost a week without a shower, we would realize how precious they are at this point.
but
especially if I, especially if you'd spent the intervening week being spattered with, zombie guts and stuff.
but that said, we know with this opening that Shane's going through some tough times.
He's gone through some stuff. And but yeah, and so he's I guess what we go to credits as soon as his head is shaved and he's looking at himself like a crazy person.
Maybe he's just looking at his super hot body in that mirror because he is amazing. Just as an aside.
Very valuable aside.
Well, they pretty much highlight it.
Yeah, they do. And it's a little bit
It's
too
a little bit
much.
much.
It's like, okay, yeah, you got a great sculpted ab situation going on there, Mr. Random Policeman from, middle of nowhere. I feel like the number of people in the world who have those kinds of abs they're pretty much all located in Los Angeles, I feel like. Or
Hmm.
they're personal trainers, I guess.
Or they really have not eaten much food since the zombie apocalypse.
Okay, it could
Like
be just more
they
of a
didn't flash
starvation
back to
abs.
like they didn't flash back to like chubby Shane eating donuts sitting in his squad car or whatever. Like of course he's got sculpted abs now. He's had barely had any food.
It's true.
Yeah, but
They're
but that
surviving on
didn't
pig's
stop
feet.
that didn't stop Otis from being all chubby. This
True.
zombie apocalypse has done nothing for Otis's waistline.
Yeah, he's like the fat guy from Lost.
Yeah.
Some people just can't lose weight. Yeah, and so from there we end up with Rick is telling a story about Shane against the backdrop of like it's a kind of like a Rick voiceover telling a story about Shane while we're watching Shane in the school.
Yeah, but then
Yeah, so
it kind of becomes down into he's actually telling the story to Laurie as they're sitting by the bedside, right?
Yeah,
yeah, by
and
Carl's sick bed.
so this is based on that opening scene and this weird like kind of voiceover slash storytelling while we're looking at Shane in the school and telling stories about Shane's exploits in high school. This is definitely the episode of Shane.
Agreed.
I declare it so. Team Shane for the win. Rick believes in Shane is kind of like the end result of what we're, because he's like, he's going to come back with the meds because Carl is still really sick.
Hmm.
Or sick, he's been shot. I mean, it's kind of different. Um, and other things happening. There, we've got some of the people are still out on the highway. Yeah, at the end of the last episode, some of them had gone straight to the house. Like Maggie had taken Lori straight to the house. Rick and Shane had gone to the house with Carl, but everybody else was still out on the highway. But so they sent Dale and Andrea and Carol and is that it? And Daryl
Daryl.
all stayed
Daryl,
out at the
yeah.
camper, and Glenn and T Dog had been sent to drive to the house. And so out at the highway, Carol it's so weird to look at her and see her so pathetic. She's just like crying into her pillow because her daughter's missing. I'm not trying to sound completely callous.
Yeah, but Carol has also been this character from the beginning of the series that was definitely not. She didn't seem like a survivor. She seemed a lot like a victim.
Yeah,
And I think this season is when we finally start to see her evolve,
Hmm.
but she's still in that state. So I agree with it is weird to go back and see her like this.
yeah. I feel like we can kind of sometimes see a core of strength in her, but it is mostly hidden with
Weeping, weeping.
weeping. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this scene is weird where Daryl is just like he's trying to sleep on the floor of the camper and he's just like looking kind of disgusted at Carol while she's crying, and Andrea is really loudly loading bullets into a pistol magazine. And then Daryl comes up with this idea. He's like, hey, I'm gonna go outside and look for Sophia because Carol's crying is getting on my nerves, or at least that's how it felt.
Yeah.
But it's actually like another part of this episode is And the two episodes we're talking about today are Daryl getting all sentimental and into helping Carol find Sophia. Like it becomes kind of his mission.
Well, and I don't think it's just that. He's becoming not he's been kind of like, yes, I'm with this group and yes, I will help out sometimes reluctantly, but this is where you actually see him wanting to help and kind of doing a little bit of a I don't want to call it a hero's journey, but he does feel like this is a task he needs to perform. Um, and he's not just doing it for his own benefit,
Hmm.
but I mean, and you see a lot more of Daryl. Like you hear his backstory a lot more in these two episodes.
Yeah, he tells a really good story about
Yeah.
himself in this episode. But before they even get to there, he's like, I'm gonna go look for Sophia. Andrea's like, I'm coming too because I'm useful. And Dale, who's standing guard, is like, do you guys think this is a good idea? It's the middle of the night and you're gonna go out with flashlights.
And they
Uh,
both just totally ignore him. They
well,
shut him down so hard.
Andrea, that's all she really does right now. She just says Dale with full contempt voice,
It's
and
like
then
the
walks
point he's
away.
making is like eminently sensible. Like this is the worst time to be going outside, and everyone's like, "Shut the fuck up, Dale." Sorry, I didn't mean to swear on your
That's
podcast.
okay. It's an explicit podcast, but yeah, he's basically the Jerry Gergich of this show. Sorry,
Hmm.
that's a Parks and Rec reference. They're just like, shut up, Dale. You don't know what you're talking about. Even though exactly, he's being completely logical.
Just sit there and be quiet on top of the camper. We don't want to hear any of your guff. He's always like you know what? He's sort of like the Jiminy Cricket, no?
I don't know how to refer to
I
that.
don't understand the reference.
You don't know who Jiminy Cricket is?
Well, I know he's like a cartoon cricket, but I don't understand. I don't know his
He's from
characteristics.
Pinocchio. Is that
Okay, yeah. So Jiminy Cricket is always like the voice of reason. Like, don't you like? Do you really want to do that? Do you think that's a good idea? And he's always being told, "Shut up, go away," whatever. And so Dale is like generally the voice of reason, and nobody wants to hear it from him. They all shut him down.
Because I guess that's kind of like TV. Because if they all did the sensible and horror, if everybody did the sensible thing all the time, it wouldn't be that interesting.
Yeah, I suppose so. But anyway, they go off onto their adventure in the woods.
And there is some logic to this. Like shining a flashlight at night is going to add a visual component to the search that, in terms of like the victim seeing the searchers,
Mm-hmm.
or the person who's lost rather than the victim, that you don't have during the day. So I can see a little bit of sense there, but you've got to think that zombies are also attracted to flashing lights.
Well, and they're also much more camouflaged at night.
Yeah, because they
So
don't have flashlights and they're just
they're
yeah,
just wandering about.
they've
So,
already managed to sneak up on Andrea during the day in broad daylight. So I'm surprised
right.
she's that willing. The same night as she almost died in the forest earlier, and was extremely panicked that she's like, oh sure, I'll go back out there, no worries.
And you can't, I mean, if there's like a torso zombie hanging around, those guys are stealthy. So,
There's yeah, there's a good little good bit of torso zombie action coming up here in the school. Because yeah, this episode we're dealing with several locations, and I think that's one of the reasons I really like this episode is the pace is just like really snappy. We're moving from not every scene has a lot of action going on, but I feel like we keep going from scene to scene fast enough to maintain my poor attention span. That is the thing I was looking for. So we go back to the school, and now Shane and what's his face are up on top of the bleachers, the scene we were discussing earlier. And they're like, what I take away from this scene when they're talking about how they're gonna get out of this predicament is what a good team they are. They're, like Otis is again speaking truth, and he's like, anything to save that kid, and I can't fit out that window, so I'm gonna go this way, and I'll draw him off while you cover me. They come up with a good plan.
they do. And Shane seems like he's working on the team.
It's a good plan, except for the part where Otis has to jump and then run. Like, I feel like we
Right.
could have anticipated some problems here.
There's only one scene in Otis's entire story arc where he's not running, I feel like, and it's when he's like sitting in the house worried about the fact that he just shot Carl. Every
Mm.
other scene, I feel like he's running, which is probably really rough on a big
Right.
guy.
Because he's always running pretty poorly because he's, had some breathing problems and such.
But when he
But no,
jumps
you're right.
off
They
the
are.
bleachers, he gets attacked by a torso zombie.
Hmm.
He does. And then other zombies try to join in. But yet he somehow manages to escape, which is shocking because he's a bit unwieldy.
With some assist from Shane, who's providing cover fire from on top of the bleacher area.
Well, true, but even with the cover fire, it feels like
Yeah.
he shouldn't have made it out of there. So,
Honestly, with all the shooting going on in this whole school escape scene, the amount of headshots is it borders on like the fantastic. It's
well, but then it also makes you wonder when there isn't a headshot and why there
Yeah,
wasn't a headshot.
like on when the two walkers are coming up to Shane and he just blows one right in the chest and then ignores the second one completely.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what are you doing? You know better. So,
Yeah, the window scare thing I felt like was you know that's coming as soon as he drops his shotgun and like is not looking at all in the window anymore, even though that's the place where he knows the biggest threat is.
right.
You know that
You
the
know it's
zombies
going to
there.
happen.
It made me jump. I'll say, even though I knew it was coming, it made me jump up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so that like again we flash from the school where now Shane and Otis have split up, but they're gonna like rally and they're still not out of the woods, but they've gotten out of the gym, I guess. Um, Glenn and T Dog show up at the house. Glenn meets Maggie, and they have a bunch of really awkward interact. Well, mostly Glenn being awkward and Maggie being
But they're
cool, and
funny.
they're very funny because Glenn is such a child.
They're
Hmm.
funny and they're like this is something that I do think is sometimes lacking in the show is there the little bits of humor that can sometimes offset the horror, you know. And I forgot about these little interactions, and they actually made me laugh out loud. So I actually very much enjoyed Glenn's awkwardness.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't know. T Dog serves kind of as decoration as he does a lot of the time. He's just kind of there looking really woozy because apparently
And sweaty.
he's funny.
Well, there's a lot of conversations going on generally in this scene, and I mean I think it's interesting that we flip from scene to scene, and I agree this is definitely episode of Shane, but it feels like you have very similar like questions going on amongst the characters. So you know, and Lori and Rick are having a lot of conversations surrounding Carl and what to do, and Daryl and Andrea are having a lot of conversations about you know the state of things now and Andrea's questionable death wish at this point. Um, and then Shane and Otis really are just having conversations about directly surviving. Um, but they all kind of end up eventually in the same place. So it's
Does Shane really end up in the same place as everybody
well,
else?
no, he doesn't, which I think is the point of having the other conversations.
Yeah.
So,
I think it's fascinating because, also a little bit annoying because what multiple people are wondering is like, is it worth it to like kind of survive in the zombocalypse? It's what Andrea is wondering and why Dale won't give her back her gun. It's what Lori's wondering. Like Lori's literally thinking like maybe Carl should just die, you know? But I feel like they kind of already all made this choice when they escaped the CDC just like 2 episodes ago. Um, and so like, uh,
what's odd to
and
me,
Rick even asks her at one point. He's like, "What's changed since the CDC?" And she like can't give him an answer. So it's like a little bit frustrating because it's kind of like we saw them do this just like relatively recently.
well, and what's odd to me about the fact that these conversations are all taking place around this time is that they are now in a place where, yes, it does seem a little bit idealized, but the farmhouse seems relatively safe. They have food, they have hot water, they have other people to help them,
Mm-hmm.
some with medical knowledge, and so it seems weird to me that these conversations are now so urgent or happening. But maybe it's because they've had time to pause and think. I don't know.
Or some weird kind of like knee jerk reaction against the good situation that they find themselves in. like almost like they can't handle the idea that they might have actually found someplace good. So they're like, this is definitely the right time to kill ourselves.
Perhaps.
Well, they've also lost or almost lost both of the children that they have with them.
True.
True.
And so I think they're also dealing with just one thing after another. And Lori says this to Rick. She's like, "We live with a knife at our throat every second of every day." And last week when you and I were talking about these episodes, there was a flashback, HA, and I said I like the flashbacks because it kind of takes me out of the tension of living in the zombie apocalypse with where these guys have to exist. And that's kind of exactly the sentiment that Lori says here. She's like, every moment I'm on the edge because I'm expecting a zombie to come out of every shadow. And I have to empathize with that would be a really difficult way to live.
Well, and difficult in thinking, okay, so my kid's totally at death's door, and we're going to do these crazy things to try to save him, none of which is guaranteed. And who knows if we do save him, what kind of physical state he'll be in.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that maybe you can be off at any moment and not be able to protect that kid, I could see how that could weigh pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And so I understand it. I just think it's interesting that this is the point that they're having the conversation, not some time ago.
Yeah, I think you
So,
hit the nail on the head though. That like they have relative safety, even though it's completely unreasonable that the farmhouse is not under more of an assault by zombies. It's brightly lit like a lighthouse, you know.
and as we'll find, well, we'll talk about this other aspect later, but I'm not going to talk about it now.
Um,
Um,
yeah, I think they've just had a moment to like sit and think, even though they're not out of the woods at all because Carl's still in peril, but they have nothing to do but like sit and look at him or go out to the porch and talk about how all the children should die. Yeah, and out in the woods, Andrea's being told Daryl's story about how he got lost. And in this scene, I also learned that Sophia is 12, and I feel like she looks a lot younger than that. But okay.
Mm.
yeah, I agree.
And
I was
Daryl's like,
surprised at that too.
I got lost when I was younger than she is, and I just what did he do? He like maybe wiped his ass with poison oak and ate
Berries in the
berries
woods.
and just found his way home because his dad was on a what was he on a bender, and Merle was in prison. And
Of
based on
course
this
he was.
story, it's like Daryl has been groomed for the zombocalypse his entire life. He's perfect.
Well, and I like how he's kind of like, you guys are a bunch of pansy asses. Like, you have no idea. This isn't that much different from that time. I was just wandering alone in the woods. Like, stop your bitching. So,
It's interesting. I also heard that line about Sophia being 12, but I just assumed they were wrong. Like, I just assumed Daryl and Andrew actually had no idea how old Sophia was and were just threw out a number because she does not look 12 at all.
No, she's small. Yeah, no, she's too small. Well, maybe she's just a little person.
But then they find this walker hanging from the tree, right? And I had totally forgotten that some members of the group called them geeks as like a slang word. And I feel like they do not say that anymore.
No.
no, they
Um,
don't.
and then I also think it's interesting that he said that the hanging zombie had been eaten by other zombies.
Yeah.
And I was like, I did not think that happened. Otherwise, all of these zombies would just be eating each other.
I think the implication was that they ate him before he turned.
Oh, I see. Like
Yeah, so he was
hung
still
himself.
alive.
I see.
He was still alive when they were eating his legs.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah, but yeah, that was obviously another hack at the. Is it what is what is it to survive, to choose to live in the zombie apocalypse? Because the guy is even left like a nice little poem on the tree. Got bit, fever hit, world's gone to shit, might as well quit.
I feel like Daryl could have written that poem
It
at
does
some point.
does sound kind of like his voice.
And he does do a nice recitation of the poem for Andrea's benefit.
Because she can't read.
Apparently not.
The thing I don't like about this scene is they don't at all go through the guy's stuff. They don't take the knife that's holding the note to the tree. They don't look for any other survival gear.
And they waste weaponry on him.
And he only has 2 crossbow bolts, and he shoots one of them into a hanging zombie's head that he cannot reach. Yeah, that was pretty dumb. But he does it to make this point, which I'm not really sure what point he was making to Andrea, but it was something like, I care.
I'm not sure any of them understand the points that they're trying to make to each other at all because he asks Andrea to give him a straight answer and then she totally doesn't and then he's like, "Yeah, that answer sucked," and then he killed the zombie anyway. So I feel like they're trying to like one up each other in like vague gestures. Neither of them really know what they're trying to convey, I think.
And back at the school, Shane and Otis are reunited. Shane's in a real tough spot, like he's surrounded. He has one round left for his shotgun, and
He's injured.
he's limping now too because he had when he hurt his leg when he jumped out of the window. There's a scene here though that is kind of frustrating because they basically recreate the exact scenario when Otis shoots Carl because uh, Shane is standing in on one end. There's a couple of zombies approaching him, and behind the zombies is Otis with the same exact rifle he used to shoot the deer that went through the bullet went through the deer and killed or hit Carl. Sorry, and he again takes that shot directly in the he shoots the zombie in the head that is
Oh
walking
man.
towards Shane, but they do not obviously have the bullet go through the zombie and into Shane.
And
But I was
that
like,
would be amazing if Otis shot both Carl and Shane because he didn't understand that bullets go through bodies and come out the other side. And then he just
He has
shows up
not
back at the
learned.
farmhouse.
Yeah.
He's like, "I got the medicine, but also Shane is shot."
I'm so sorry. I'll go
I'm so
back to
sorry.
get more medicine.
I don't understand simple physics.
But luckily, the bullet does not hit Shane, and they're now reunited and running away. Although they both admit that they have no more bullets for their long arms. Shane with the shotgun and Otis with the rifle, which he didn't really understand. But now they just have a Otis obviously he still has Rick's big gun, and Shane has a 9mm which he used when he was falling from the window. And then we leave them again, and we go back to Carl is having brain blood shortage seizures. And here's
And
a
Rick
question:
just and Rick just keeps giving his blood.
why doesn't anybody else in this farmhouse, and there's like 12 people there,
Do they not know their blood type? Well, A
is
positive is actually not as common as you would imagine.
I've got it. You
I
want
do
some?
too.
I can give it to you right now.
I do too. Therefore, we could donate to each other. But maybe these people just don't know their blood types. Lots of
Over
people don't.
Skype.
I do not know my blood type. I sympathize with these people.
Oh, dude.
It's always one of those things that I know that I should know, but I have no idea.
It's
And I
the
asked my
only
parents.
tattoo I've ever had any inkling of getting is my blood type, and no known allergy is tattooed like on my torso.
Sure, when you develop a peanut allergy, you'll have to like get it striked out.
Yeah, that's no problem. I can do that. I'll turn it into a dragon or something, and then be like, yes, peanut allergy. And so it'll be blood type dragon peanut allergy.
Nice.
Um,
But anyway, yeah, no, I thought the same thing. I was saying to myself, like, come on, somebody else in this house has to know their blood type, right?
just don't take T Dog's blood because he's got the blood poison still.
Also, he
Right.
doesn't have very much blood left.
And he just let it all pour out into the traffic jam. Maggie and Glenn have a conversation about God, which I don't get.
A lot of God conversations these couple episodes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, and I also think that these are to set up some things with Herschel's camp versus the
Right.
other camp.
Mhm.
But
But
really, Maggie's taking the anti-God position in this argument because Glenn's like, I'm praying, although I don't ever do it, and she's like, well, you've got to make it right with yourself.
right. But you also get the feeling that if her dad was to hear her,
Yeah,
he would not be very happy.
she's a bit of a black sheep.
And she gets even blacker, as we see.
Oh, you mean more sinful?
Yes.
Yes, the sin is strong with this one. Yeah, and so also Dale is wandering off from the camper after talking to Carol. Like, I'm gonna go look for Daryl and Andrea. I don't
Right.
really
And
know
then
why this scene even needed to be included.
I think it was to just show that Carol still didn't know how to use a weapon, because that was the part that I was like, really? You still don't know? You still don't know how to use anything? He's like, okay, well, just stay on top of this and yell loud if you see anything. That's
It's like,
helpful.
what were you guys doing during all those hours that you were spending, like driving in the camper, like just sitting in the back seat? Like somebody should have been like, "Hey guys, weapons class."
Well, and also, and this is if you're running around this world and you have a kid to take care of, don't you think you would learn it? I don't care who you are. You're gonna try to learn to defend yourself much sooner than this. But
Mhm.
again, at least they start to in this particular area of the series. But
It's bizarre. Rick and Lori have another conversation because Carl wakes up briefly, and the first thing and only thing he wants to talk about is the deer that he saw right before he got shot. And he's like, "It was so pretty, Mom. You should have seen it." And then he goes into his seizure. I guess so. Yeah, that was earlier. Um, and Rick seizes upon this to be like, "See, he has to live because he didn't talk about the zombies. He
he talked
talked
about
about
hope
he talked about the deer." And I, yeah,
not as a food source.
just about how pretty it was. So you guys buying that argument?
I think it's a bit of a weak argument. I honestly, as much as Lori annoys me in some points, I feel like her thoughts in this particular conversation sound a little bit more reasonable
I took
than
this to be the raving of a blood-starved Rick.
Sheriff.
Like he doesn't have any blood left. He's starting to act like T-Dog was last week when on the highway and stuff. Like he's just talking total nonsense because this did not make any sense to me whatsoever.
That's a good point. He could have the blood. He might have the blood poison himself.
Or just like, even after they take like, a tiny amount of blood out of your body, they give you like a cookie and tell you like not to stand up too fast. Like he's probably just woozy.
Yeah. So Carl is getting worse. They're about to operate. Shane suddenly drives up at the 11th hour by
With the
himself.
crazy eyes.
With
The crazy
he
eyes.
does have the crazy eyes, and he has to be like, Otis didn't make it, and we're all, and he's like, he stayed behind to save me. And at this point, you could be like, dude, they're not even gonna show. They're not gonna show. They're gonna do an off-screen death for Otis. That's bullshit. But I think we can also admit that we might have known we were gonna find out eventually, based on the whole shower scene at the beginning of the show.
Yes, those abs were foreshadowing something evil,
I do think that
dark.
the story that the writers had to go through some kind of weird contortions because they really wanted to put the Otis stuff at the end of the episode, but they also wanted to like get over like the Carl being sick and stuff like that. They didn't want to put that off till episode 4.
Mm-hmm.
So like I just find the double flashback thing a little bit weird because we're at the beginning and then we flash back and then we come back to when Shane arrives at the thing and then a couple minutes later like he flashes back again, like he's just continuing to have flashbacks. Um, and I think they probably should have just shown it where it needed to be shown in the because it also like it kind of robs. I don't know. I feel like having that context of knowing that like Shane shot Otis and left him there to die, like when he shows up at the house, you understand what he's doing, and I just find the emotional resonance of that a little bit better. I wish they'd have just put it in the middle of the episode where it needed to be, and not tried to, you know, go through all these contortions to stick it there at the end.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, it would have had the same impact to have him doing the whole head shaving, looking crazy, even if you had already known for the last 10 minutes that he had done the deed.
Exactly.
And it would put more context to his crazy faces.
Hmm.
But don't you think that they want some mystery surrounding why he's behaving so strangely? So you see the reactions without knowing what has happened. You're kind of like, oh, he's just shell shocked because he had a close scrape with the zombie, and all these people are sympathetic and things like that. I feel like they were trying to leverage that story and have the big reveal. I agree. I don't think it was as successful as it would have been if they had just made it not a flashback, but I feel like they were trying to rev up the dramatic with how they presented it.
Yeah, I guess you could have interpreted his bug eyes to be like guilt at the other man's death at his benefit, which is kind of what it is. Either
Hmm.
way, I don't know. Um, so when he shows up and he goes into the room and Carl has been saved, uh, Lori tells him to stay. And I thought she meant like stay in the room with me right now here, and then he walks away. So that wasn't apparently what she meant. And they go into this again in the next episode, and we'll talk about it there too. But I thought that was weird. Um, Dale gives Andrea back her gun, and
Because
she's like,
she's a big girl now.
he again is being very logical. He's like, this wasn't obviously it was not totally rational and cool of him to take her gun away, although she had no idea how to use it.
Mhm.
Uh, and so he's like, this wasn't my decision to make, and I made decisions for you, and I'm sorry, and I hope we're okay now, and please don't make me regret giving you back your gun by shooting yourself in the head with it. And
Or
she's like,
me.
I will think about forgiving you one day, because she's just so pouty and annoying. Anyway, and that's kind of pretty close to the end of the episode. It's except for Maggie gives Shane a bunch of Otis's clothes, not like half an hour after he killed the guy.
Again, like an emotional beat that does not land because you don't know what Shane has done. Like,
It could land in just the different way where that guy sacrificed his life for me as an act of valor. It's just they're kind of similar. It'll draw similar emotions from the character to whom these clothes are being given, like, oh, I feel guilty, or oh, I feel guilty because I killed the guy. I don't know. I feel like it's similar, but there's a nuance of it's not that nuanced. It's actually it's different, but it'll draw the same kind of emotional reaction. And we end with more abs and crazy faces, and he's
And
really
not and not
shaking.
just abs. This is like so gratuitous because they basically pretty much show like all the way down to like his hips. Like it's just so bizarre the way that they shoot this scene. And I'm just like, I mean, hey, you know what? Shane, obviously you got a sick body. It's okay. We know you guys want to show it off, but was this really necessary? It was super weird.
can I make a point about John
His
Bernthal here?
abs.
No, not about his abs, just about him as a person. Um, like I'm pretty sure, like after a long time of like pondering why Walking Dead like actually works as a television show when for some reasons it kind of shouldn't. I've concluded that it kind of runs on three things: zombies, tragedy, and charisma. Like they have a lot of actors who are not particularly good actors, but who are very camera friendly and charismatic. Like maybe you don't believe all of the emotions that they're saying, but you just like watching them in those roles. Um, even when they're saying things like, he talked about the deer, like he's still like watching Andrew Lincoln on screen. And so most of the show's like cullings of characters, honestly, they usually have eliminated the least charismatic people. So they've kind of like distilled it down to where like in season 4 now they have an extremely charismatic cast. Almost everybody on that cast is really, really, really fun to watch on screen. Like Norman Reedus has charisma coming out of his ears. Andrew Lincoln's extremely charismatic. Even people like Carol and Maggie and Glenn, it's just like people who are really fun to watch on screen. With and the people who die are usually the people who are really annoying to watch on screen, like Lori, Andrea, Dale, T Dog. These people did not have charisma. These people were never able to take the like lines that they were given and imbue them with that kind of intense interest. But they did. I mean, maybe we're jumping ahead a little bit, but this episode maybe made me really regret that John Bernthal is not on the show anymore because he is charismatic as shit. Like
Mm-hmm.
he
All
really
right.
like sells this staring maniacally into the mirror stuff that's going on, and
Kyle,
he's
I was gonna have like a throwdown with you if you were going in that other direction.
no, no, no.
So I'm glad you came
John
out where you
Bernthal.
should have.
he he is like the one time when they like sacrificed the person who like had true charisma, because like this episode just really makes you realize like what an asset he was to the show for its first 2 seasons, and like
But
he is a more compelling screen presence than anyone else on this show at this point.
well,
um,
and I also think though because of the graphic novels and that storyline, this character and his relationship with Rick Grimes is that's pulling the heartstrings. That's part of why the story works is this tug of war between these two characters, and it's a very important relationship and it's a very important loss, and you feel that loss like resonate in many parts of the series and further on down the road.
mhm.
So I think it was amazing casting that they did. They cast him exactly as I thought he should be cast, and it did make me miss him as well, though, seeing these scenes and
Yeah.
his crazy intense eyes.
Yeah.
And keeping him around longer in the TV show only
True.
kind of draws the audience closer with him, even though he is kind of a loose cannon. And yeah, he is an excellent foil for the Rick character. And honestly, one of my takeaways from this episode 3 was that and it's probably in the context of having been totally caught up on all the Walking Dead up through season 4, where we are now, that I'm sick of Rick Grimes' tormented leader shtick. I'm just going back and doing this again. It's kind of exhausting to see him have to struggle with all these moral dilemmas all the time.
You feel that way in the graphic novels too. Like that storyline gets very just as tired, if
Yeah.
not more so.
We need to get a move on though and hop into episode 4, which I don't. Well, I didn't like as much as episode 3, so I think I'll be able to talk about it faster.
I would agree with you.
The very first scene is of like an idyllic pastoral setting. We've got a foggy morning in the Georgian farmland. There are cows grazing in a field, which we see at least one more time this episode. And right here, I'm like, how the fuck do they still have cows? Why are zombies not coming to this farm?
Well, right. And also, this is, again, another instance where they're in this sort of they're not in a realistic world at this point. This is a bit dreamlike.
Like when you consider the prison stuff, story arc stuff, zombies just keep showing up there all the time. And we just don't. I mean, you have like the occasional zombie, and I think this was probably a reason why this was not a fan favorite season, is because the zombies were kind of few and far between, and they had this unrealistically safe haven without walls. I mean, it
There's
just
no
has.
barriers to keep anything away. Like this is totally not what would have happened or what you would have imagined would have happened.
However, the only way that Herschel can maintain his unrealistic perception of the world, I guess, is by having the farm not be under assault constantly.
Hmm.
Right.
Which obviously that stuff comes up a little later, although he's touching on it again at the end of this episode. But we start off with
With the funeral.
Otis's funeral, and Shane. How do you think of John Bernthal and his Otis clothes?
Well, I just think again, when you see a character like him, he's now out of uniform and he's in overalls. Hmm.
He looks like.
He looks super weird, and
uh,
it's like the overalls just trouble me.
I think that John Bernthal was probably like, okay, I'll wear these overalls, but only if we put multiple shirtless scenes in the previous episode, so the audience already knows I'm kind of banging underneath. Like, I'm not gonna wear these overalls just without that kind of context.
But then he gets out of the overalls pretty quickly in this episode too, so it's sort of like, why is he even wearing the overalls in this scene? This is very odd.
Well, it's because he has to be wearing Otis's clothes at Otis's eulogy.
In order to eulogize the guy that he
Yes.
killed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't know. I wasn't really into the eulogy. So it was a tough conundrum to be put into, and he delivers because he's probably a sociopath on some level. I guess we have to.
He is, but you also see Dale with his usual, like, I think you're totally insane look toward
He's
toward
giving him the
Shane.
old Dale eyebrows.
I feel
Yeah.
like Dale, like, is just continuously astonished at the idiocy and insanity of the people like. Dale's whole crazy eyes thing. Maybe he's like a totally logical person underneath, and he's just like, I can't say anything, but these people are nuts. Like,
Well, but every time he does give any warning or sort of try to give people hints that something is not right, they totally ignore him.
He did
I guess
something.
better than a Jiminy Cricket, he's more like a Cassandra. Nobody ever believes his prophecies.
probably because they're
Um,
paired with those crazy eyes.
and this is a question
Maybe.
I had during the funeral scene. It seems like just about everybody's there. We see Beth for the first time and her boyfriend. Uh, who's with Carl?
I don't know, but he's never in the house.
Well, he's in the house this time because he's been shot, and I'm pretty sure he's
Yeah, but
bedridden.
but nobody's asking where he is, so
Who's with him? Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Maybe he's just recuperating, dreaming about deer.
Would you leave your invalid son alone?
No, you're right. I think that they probably would not leave him completely alone, seeing as how he's just been through major surgery and lost all the blood.
Yeah.
All the
Um,
blood.
all of
All
the
the
blood.
blood. Now he just has Rick's blood.
Uh, yeah. So funeral scene comes and goes. We look at more plans to find Sophia. They're like getting organized.
And you also see some conflicts here between the two camps and their ideas of things,
Especially
and
when, yeah.
more of Herschel's lunacy.
Well, yeah, it's subtle, I guess, though, still at this point. But they're like, what do we do if we find Sophia and she's infected? And Rick's not really hesitating. He's like, okay, yeah, we'll do what we have to. We'll take care of it.
But
And
then Maggie and Herschel definitely exchange some knowing looks with each other. And
yeah.
Herschel very clearly nods at Maggie, like, don't tell them anything or something. So,
And shortly thereafter, Herschel tells Rick, by the way, you guys can't stay here forever. You have to leave as soon as this.
and also, I don't want any guns on the property. What?
Obviously, we've moved past this kind of idiocy in the show, and I'm glad. Um, but also, so Daryl's decided he's going to go out looking for Sophia by herself. Shane's going to go back out to the traffic jam, and one person gets to have a rifle. And yeah,
I did like that Daryl was like, I'm not gonna have anything to do with any of this. I'm going off on my own.
I feel like Rick in this episode is actually less of the annoying, tormented leader because he's being a little bit more authoritarian and kind of laying down the law, even though a lot of it's like still paying too much respect to Herschel and his stupid rules, but he isn't all like hand wringy about it at this point. So I kind of preferred the way he acted.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like sometimes he's acting this way in a reaction to having Herschel there, also as an author, like Herschel's the leader of this camp, and I feel like Rick kind of enjoys interacting with the other leader and as the spokesman for the group.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel some part of why he isn't as hand wringing is he's sort of taking an example from Herschel, but it's he is less annoying than usual in this particular episode.
Herschel really does resonate. Like he just exudes leadership because when he comes up to Rick to deliver the news about you can't stay here, he's just like, Rick, I don't say this easily, but once your son is better, you guys have to
You're,
leave, and I expect you to understand that. And then he just turns around and walks away. Like he doesn't
yep.
even wait for a rebuttal. He's just like, all right, peace, drops the mic, I'm out.
And I would like Kyle to introduce the next little section, since this is part of why you are here today.
So we have arrived at the well zombie.
Well,
So
actually, the conversation is, I was going to say the conversation between Maggie and Dale about the wells.
they basically tell the survivors that they can, the Rick's group that they can take water from a particular one of the wells.
Is it the cattle well? That's what's not clear to me.
Yeah, it's for the livestock.
Mhm.
Okay. But
Yeah.
it's clean.
I think.
Ostensibly. um, yeah, so then I guess it's Dale and T-Dog at first, right? They head out to some other stuff happens before they head out to the well though, like between
Well,
Laurie and Glenn, I think.
and well, yeah, Glenn gets marching orders to go and find some special stuff for Lori, and also Shane and Lori have a little conversation because Shane asks Lori, and they're constantly awkward around each other, but he asks her, "What did you mean when you said stay?" Or did you? No, he doesn't ask her what she meant. He asks her, "Did you mean it when you said stay?" And she's like, "Yes, I meant it." But now, don't you wonder what the fuck stay means still?
Yeah. Does that mean stay and be part of the group? Does that mean stay and be my lover? Does that mean, what does that mean?
They're leaving a
Um,
lot of context out of this conversation that I think everybody needs to be clear on, including the
well,
two of them.
Yeah.
because then Shane goes all crazy eyed and we know nothing good happens with
But
that.
directly after that conversation, like, yeah, he could have just gone, nutty. Instead, he's like got the bag of guns and he's going through it, and Andrea shows up and she's like, "Give up our guns." And you have to remember, she only just got her gun back last night, and now she's having to
Really has
give
a
it up again.
complex about these guns, man.
And
Like,
she still doesn't know how to use it.
No. But yeah, so this was awesome. Shane is like, "Look, I've got to strip him and clean him. Do you wanna do it, or do you want to just bitch?" And he turns it into a teaching moment. And so I'm like, yeah, Shane still has a shred of sanity left inside his crazy eyes.
At
Uh,
least when it relates to weaponry.
yeah. And well, yeah, Andrea. Also, we have T-Dog apologizes for going apeshit on, not apeshit, but batshit crazy on Dale. And Dale's like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, everybody has some secrets in this episode. T-Dog's like, "Don't tell everybody all that crazy stuff I said because I was crazy." And Dale's like, "Oh, okay. I don't remember this conversation." And then Lori asks Glenn to do something super secret and get something super secret for her from the pharmacy, which is a lady related product, apparently.
Hmm.
I don't think it's for, you know, I think it's a very awkward exchange between the two of them.
Glenn, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that if I was asked to get this product, I would know what it was for
Yeah, most people would.
because it
Um,
probably just said pregnancy test on the piece of paper that she
right.
gave
Like
him.
I love how he's like, "What is this? Oh, wait,
I don't understand.
I'm not asking you what this is. I'm just asking you where to find it." And yeah, and then Herschel and Maggie obviously have their little secrets that they're not telling people about.
Hmm.
So,
Lost.
there's a lot of people keeping things from each other in this episode. It suddenly goes to like super paranoid camp.
But then something that's not a secret, or I guess it was for a while. Go Kyle. Go Kyle.
So, when Stuart said to me, like, "Do you want to talk about anything on Walking Dead season 2?" I was like immediately like, "Well, zombie."
Mm.
And so, they kind of intersperse and cut between a couple of things here, but I'll just talk about the well zombie as a whole. So Dale and T Dog walk out to one of the wells, and right as T Dog is about to drink some water from a ladle, Dale notices that there's a giant, disgustingly swollen, like soggy zombie standing in the bottom of the well, and they eventually get everyone. So like a bunch of people come out. Maggie comes out. Lori comes out. And they try to haul. Glenn comes out, and they decide that they have to get the zombie out of the well before it contaminates the water, which is like totally insane. Especially since they cut to the zombie like multiple times, and it has blood like running down its face.
Yeah,
I was like,
obviously,
this water.
obviously he is seeped into the water.
I was like,
Part
no
many
one is gonna
parts of
drink this
him.
water ever again.
No.
Um, but they decide they have to get it out of there, so they lower Glenn down like on a pulley, and he, almost dies, of course, because things break, and the pulley almost drops him right on the face of the zombie, but manages to slip the lasso around the zombie's waist, and then they all pull him out, and right as they get him to the top, and his like giant, like disgustingly swollen belly is like breaching the top of the well, he breaks in half, and like all of his guts like fall back into the well. Um, and the reason why I just think that this is so, it like so perfectly epitomizes like what is so good and so bad about The Walking Dead in general, season 2 in particular. Like, I think that probably the worst thing that ever happened to The Walking Dead was getting expanded from 6 episodes a season to 10 or 12. Like it just lost that kind of like breakneck pace that we all so enjoyed last episode, and that you guys will probably not enjoy for a little while here coming up. And when I was reading about this originally, back when the show first aired, I read that Greg Nicotero basically went to the production company and the SFX company and was like, "Hey, like we'd love to work for you guys. Like put together a demo or something, and like let's see if we can get you some time on the show because we've accepting competing bids for the special effects and stuff like that." And the production company called him back and was like, "Hey, we've got this idea for a zombie in a well." And then they wrote it into the story. Like,
Well, and I felt it was to me it was very it just felt like it was Nicotero and the special effects company going insane and being like, "We want to show this, so we're gonna do this."
I think it was
Right?
literally like, "Hey guys, shit, we have got to fill 12 40-minute episodes with maybe 7 episodes worth of story. Like what are we going to do for these additional like 2 hours or whatever?" And then Greg Nicotero's like, "Well, zombie, they can spend seriously probably 20 minutes figuring out what to do with the zombie, hauling it out, and then when it explodes, it's going to look really, really awesome." And to be fair, when the zombie
It did.
explodes, it looked awesome.
Hmm.
It was
Did.
so
The
gross.
the only thing that would have been better is if the zombie in question had been played by Boyd Banks.
So it
Yeah.
just seems like it's such an epitome of The Walking Dead. It's like the characters like are doing something that they don't really understand why they're doing. and that the audience knows is like totally stupid, but they do it anyway, and then it doesn't work, and they're
And
right back where they started.
and their
But
failure
that's
doesn't
also
really impact the story like
Nope.
that much because
Does
they
they
have
just
5
like
wells on the property, so they
they're
just went
like,
to
oh,
the
we'll
other
just
3.
seal this one off, and we'll still have plenty of water for Shane to flush down the shower.
Well, I actually thought because they were so focused on the shower scenes when they introduced the well zombie, when I first saw this started out the season, I said, "Oh, are they gonna are they gonna is it gonna turn out that all this water that they keep showing flowing from this shower is all contaminated and that some character is going to get the well water in their cut or whatever?" Like I thought that's maybe where they were going with it, but
Nope.
no.
Has no
No, it had
impact on anything.
absolutely nothing to do.
So
So my
it's like,
initial reaction to this wasn't necessarily, I was like, oh, they spent a lot of time on this, but maybe they're gonna circle back to this and the results of their folly later. But no,
I think
nope.
that it's really just that season 2 Walking Dead is so leaderless, um, that the special effects company is dictating the plot rather than the writers coming up with things that they want the special effects writers to portray. Like they're literally like, hey, we can do this cool thing, and we don't even have to write a story, a narrative based reason for it. The characters are just going to spend half the episode hauling this zombie up, and then it's going to explode, and then they're all just going to kind of walk away and be disgusted with themselves.
I'm kind of in awe and shocked, Kyle, that you have destroyed what I thought was like one of the cool moments of season 2. And now you've like opened my eyes to the fact that it was just a giant waste of time and had no
Did you
narrative
wait?
impact.
Did you not think that before, Stuart?
No, I
Really?
thought it was just like a cool thing. But then when you think of it in the terms of in relation to the narrative, it doesn't drive anything forward. It doesn't like really expand any character arc except for Glenn and Maggie, because Maggie looks at Glenn and his willingness to go into the well and is like, "Why are you such a tool? I'll still have sex with you."
Although the sex scene was, or that whole interaction was somewhat hilarious.
I actually think the sex scene is in the pharmacy. So obviously, then Glenn and Maggie go into town to go to the pharmacy, and there's all kinds of like innuendos, like not explicit and non-explicit. So like if you know what's happening later in the episode, like at one point Rick says about Glenn, he's like, "Oh, Glenn's our go-to-town expert," and then like Maggie comes up to him and is like, "Oh, hey, you have experience getting in and out quickly." And like there's all kinds of like sexual
There are,
innuendos.
but you know what? I really liked that they were doing that because, again, I feel like you need to have a little bit of humor to balance out some of the other stuff, and so they pretty much use all of it on Glenn and Maggie.
Mm-hmm. And
Uh,
I do think that the interaction between Glenn and Maggie in the pharmacy is almost perfect. Like it's
it
as
is.
awkward as it should be. It's like as kind of like lustful as it should be. You get the sense there's genuine like feeling and stuff there, but also there's just like this kind of pent up sexual frustration of a woman who's been stuck on a farm with no one but her family for like 6 months, and then Glenn
With
who's
her with her very religious family.
yeah, and I really loved they didn't interrupt it with a random zombie attack, which is what I expected the first time that I watched this, and I
Me
expected
too.
they take this lovely moment and destroy it because that's what Walking Dead does, but this time they restrain themselves, and it's just actually a lovely moment. I actually think that's great. It's one of the better parts of season 2.
Yeah, Glenn is just so innocent, and Stephen Yoon manages to convey that so nicely that he's just like, he looks down at when she takes off her shirt and everything. He looks down. He's like, "Oh my God." Like he's never seen boobs before, and it's just I was like, "Oh yeah, go
Well,
Glenn."
he's very, he's not very mature.
When she like surprises him and he's looking at the pregnancy test, she's like, "Did you find something?" He's like, "Oh no!" And he shoves that in his bag and picks up the first thing he finds, and it's condoms.
What you got?
Nothing, just, like I said, general stuff.
Condoms. You got a girlfriend I don't know about?
I mean, no. No.
Then you're a pretty confident guy.
No. No. I wasn't, I would never.
Something wrong with me?
No. No, I would never have sex. I'm lost.
I'll have sex with you.
Really? Why?
You're asking questions?
I can't help wondering.
It's not like our options are vast these days.
Her seduction technique is telling him that he is the last man on Earth.
Yes, totally. She's like, well, we might as well because we're here
I don't
and
have many
you're a
options.
man.
So yeah, lots of elements of that scene are just they're funny, and it is, as you said, a touching scene. So yeah,
Well, and
it's good.
it's I think it has added poignancy now that it didn't have at the time, because at the time we did not know if either of these characters were going to, um, make it through the mid-season break. But I think both, going back to the charisma thing, both Maggie and Glenn have proven to have more than their fair share of charisma, and their relationship is one of the central aspects of the show in season 4. So it's kind of nice to see where that all started.
Elsewhere, Daryl has been out by himself searching for Sophia, and he actually finds what could be evidence that she is still alive. And like, driving this storyline forward as slow as it's going, it's like a goddamn Zamboni or something. He goes into an old house and finds an empty sardine can, and then like opens a closet and there's somebody's tiny bed.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, oh my god, she could still be out there. But at the same time, it's like day 4. He has told the story about how he survived for several days in the wilderness by himself. But Sophia, I think we can all say, is no Daryl.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finds some flowers and he goes back and tells Carol a story about American history and folklore and Native Americans. And is the point of the story he tells her basically that he thinks Sophia is dead and this flower bloomed for her?
I don't know. It's hard to tell.
Tough to say. Yeah, I'm not sure quite what
Well, and
Daryl.
the only reason, I mean, because later on when things happen, he's very upset
Mm-hmm.
when it's revealed what's happened to Sophia. So I think he's doing this to give some hope to her. Um, Although you could read it that way, I suppose. And you see the relationship between Daryl and Carol here
And yeah, I
too.
still don't really get it. It just seems all of a sudden it comes out of nowhere for me. Like Daryl is just kind of this asshole who is useful, and it's never really been clear why he's stayed with the group when he's such a loner. Um, so I guess they felt like they needed to show him having an empathetic connection with another member of the group. But to go from he is potentially the strongest because he doesn't have the same kind of emotional issues that Rick has, and that doesn't have the crazy that Shane has, and he's gonna be attracted to helping the weakest member of the group. I don't know. It doesn't. For me, it just doesn't really resonate at this point.
Well, and it's also like I feel like the series kind of uh, dropped the whole aspect that Carol has just very, very recently gotten out of a pretty abusive relationship. It never really mentions it again throughout all of The Walking Dead, but it makes their interactions here even kind of weirder. Like I just don't really see that Daryl, knowing what situation Carol like recently came from. I don't know. Nothing about it really makes
Although
sense.
you could see that, I mean, because Daryl implies, and he tells a little bit more further on, and he implies some things about his father and about his upbringing. Perhaps
Mm,
he feels a kinship with Carol because of that abuse.
yeah,
And
maybe.
maybe that's why he does feel the need to protect her because he understands where that is coming from. That was my read on why he reached out to her.
Could be.
But the other big thing this episode is the interactions between Rick and Herschel and about the group staying. And I mean, basically, Rick really wants them to stay there because he's like, "This is a safe haven. We don't have to run and whatever." And Herschel is definitely reluctant about this,
Hmm.
but is somewhat. He's basically like, "If you follow the rules of my house, I'll consider it."
Hmm.
And here it's interesting because Rick is speaking for the group without consulting anybody in the group.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think some of the things he's chatting about with Herschel, Daryl and some of the others are not going to be totally thrilled about.
I feel
Yeah.
like he's giving them options though, whereas Herschel's like kind of trying to take those options away and being like, there is no place for you here. Rick is trying to figure out a way that, what conditions would have to be met in order for them to have a place there.
I mean, I have a feeling that it's mostly just Rick kind of not really anticipating that anyone would have any other course of action in mind. Like, are you nuts? Like, why would you leave this place? This is like, as we've mentioned, it somehow like does not exist in the same physical universe as the Zombocalypse. And I don't know. Can you imagine? I mean, we'll see this over the next couple episodes, but I don't think in that moment Rick can imagine that, for example, like Shane would want to just like, you know, put on his backpack and walk out the front gate.
Well, they were all on their way to Fort Benning when the
Well, right.
first episode started, and I don't think they've had any news that would suggest that Fort Benning is not still a place that he should go.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little strange that yeah they've had some engine trouble literally, and they're missing Sophia, and Carl is in no condition to travel, but it's a little bit weird to be like, oh, our
Let's
goal.
stay forever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, and then obviously the wrap up of the episode, the big reveal, which I'm sure everybody was anticipating at this point, is the whole Laurie's big news.
Yeah, she's pregnant, and Rick, meanwhile, is giving Carl his sheriff's hat, which is also kind of a very iconic moment from the books, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where they leave it. Sophia's still out there. Or maybe she's not. Maybe she's somewhere else.
When I Googled this episode to like look at plot summaries and stuff, after I watched it last night, I found a random review from the LA Times that I just clicked on because I was interested to see what contemporaneous people thought about it. And in the comment section, people are like, 3 episodes to find a missing girl? Come on, find this girl already. And then someone's like, we should do an episode from Sophia's point of view. And everyone's like, yeah, that'd be awesome. And I was like, no, it wouldn't. It'd be really boring.
Yes, of course it would be.
But,
It would just be dark, and there's a lot of straw.
like, I was just a little bit surprised. I don't remember what I thought in the moment, but I was a little bit surprised how many people were like had no doubt in their minds that Sophia was still alive and would eventually be returned.
But I think some of that is because within the graphic novels, she's one of the long-standing characters, and I don't think people could imagine that they were going to kill her off.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the and at this point, yes, they have done some things differently, but they hadn't diverged. So, I mean, yes, Shane's still alive, and they have a couple of things, but they hadn't really. They're still following somewhat of an outline, and I think that because she was such a long-standing character and had so many interactions with Carl and with Glenn and Maggie,
Mm-hmm.
that they just were. I don't think people really thought they were going to kill her off.
Interesting. I did not know that, but that definitely explains a lot about why these people had so much faith. I was like, I should have learned by now that.
I personally thought she was dead.
Yeah.
but I was like, okay, there's no way, because they hadn't done anything with her, and I just felt like it was all going to end in tears. It had to. So, well, thank you so much, Kyle, for joining us today in our discussion. Always a pleasure to have you as a special guest star.
Oh, thank you very much for having me on. It was a lot of fun.
And where can everybody find you when you're not talking with us?
So you can find me on Tumblr, kyledeas.tumblr.com. I'm not super active on there, but I do post some stuff. And then I co-host a podcast, Pop Cultural Osmosis. We just recorded an episode about Veronica Mars and True Detective, and we're going to be talking about Grand Budapest Hotel and Brooklyn Nine-Nine next episode. There's lots of good stuff there. So popculturalosmosis.tumblr.com.
Excellent. And if you have any thoughts on season 2 and episodes 3 and 4, please email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us at reanimatedpcast. And that is about it. All right. So we will be discussing even more of season 2. It will be episodes 5 and 6. So until next time, ciao.